start the session or make a quick housekeeping request. First, I see there's a lot of Shazaslam joined in. And so apologies, I mistakenly have shared my own link to join in. So if you all could kindly rename yourself, you would see 3 dots. If you put the cursor on your name, you would see 3 dots. And if you click rename, you can rename yourself. So I would kindly request if everybody can rename themselves. And other than speakers, would kindly request, please keep yourself on mute. We would have a QA session in the end, so we would follow up on that. As for the brief agenda, we will have a quick welcome note from myself, and then a theme setting from Ali Syed, followed by some feedback and keynote sessions from Dr. Zegam from Ministry of Climate Change, Dr. Safdar Ali Sohail from SPRC, which is a Social Protection Resource Center. Then Asma Gul from Akhtar Hamid Khan Memorial Trust, which is an NGO, but also a niche enterprise, which is working with waste pickers and waste management sector. And then some advisory or commentary remarks from Dr. Mansoor Ali, who is a lead advisory at Royal Academy. We also have some participants and colleagues from WIEGO joined in. So we would also have some remarks or perhaps some comments in a Q&A session or in the end. With that, I think I can go ahead with briefing the agenda, perhaps more about the context of this event. So this is more of a pioneering or very comprehensive report in the sector of informal sector, specifically waste pickers in Pakistan. As you might be aware, some of you, that the informal sector plays a pivotal role in fostering climate change, but also circular economy, particularly in low-income, middle-income countries, where waste pickers play a crucial role in collecting, diverting waste from recycling materials, markets, from landfills and other communities and neighborhoods. And not only they reduce life cycle utilities, but also reducing life cycle and landfill usage, applying to supply secondary materials, despite significant challenges and lack of, let's say, initiatives at particular levels. And this particular research is commissioned by International Alliance for Waste Pickers and Women in Informal Employment and Globalization and an organization, short for WIEGO, and for Alliance for Waste Pickers. This project was undertaken by Ouroboros Waste Management and Circular Economy initiative led at Karachi School of Business and Leadership, known as Circular Plastic Institute. With this, I'll hand over to my colleague Ali for setting a brief about the context of this report, let's say. Ali Syed is a circular economy and waste management professional with over the experience of 10 years within Southeast Asia, Australia, and Europe. He has a range of contribution to international and national organizations like IFC, World Bank, and others. And Ali, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shiza. Welcome, everyone. Really happy to be hosting this and sharing our findings and study with you. Just quickly, going to keep it brief because I can talk about this all day. Just a bit about the project. It's been 10 years in the making, starting from ground level. We've been trying to, as a firm and with our partners like CPI, KSBL, and others, been trying to look at how we can reverse brain drain, bring international learnings in, and also spring up, localize indigenous learnings and unearth our sector. In terms of what the mix is within project partners, got international organizations, you've got KSBL, you've got technical academia background and expertise. Ourselves, just going to quickly snapshot, we've tried to, within our firm and with our partners, try to merge the value chain actors, the supply chain and learning, so we can get a full spectrum pocket and not keep working in silos. Through that, we've driven local knowledge, we've driven international knowledge, and we've driven more current context of global conversation, and try to see how we can reset the tone for the landscape of waste pickers, not just coupled as the informal sector, not just coupled as Kabaria, but at base level humans that are interacting within the value chain, like everybody here today, within the private sector, NGOs, academia, consultants, experts, waste collectors, on how we're all contributing to the sector from the collection side, generation side, all the way up, and how we can set and reset the tone for Pakistan to propel policy initiatives, projects, and work a bit better together, understanding everybody's role. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ali. This is more to set the context why waste picker or the supply chain involvement has been so important in Pakistan. I'll now share my screen just to brief about the key highlights or the key findings. So bear with me for a while. Meanwhile, yeah. Okay, great. I hope it's visible to all. Ali, if you can confirm, please.
Yep, it's visible.
Okay, great. So
Good
this
luck.
is to brief about the key findings for our report and a study that we conducted over the span of 8 months. The title, which we thoroughly concluded as mapping the landscape of waste pickers in Pakistan, challenges, opportunities, and organizational strategies therein. For this study, we conducted stratified sampling at 3 cities of Pakistan, namely Karachi, Lahore, Moridke. Karachi and Lahore being the mega cities. Karachi has a population of more than 20 million, with Lahore more than population of 12 million, and then Moridke, one secondary city, just to kind of have a comparison between mega cities and the secondary cities supply chains, but also the context within which waste pickers also interplay and then also live together. In each city, we conducted 40 interviews, again being stratified in a way that it was concluded that we are to capture all waste groups that I will briefly touch upon. In addition, we conducted 20 surveys as well. The purpose of conducting interviews was to understand more about their organizational strategies and how as an entrepreneur see themselves. With interviews or with surveys, we specifically looked into what sort of challenges they have and what areas of social protection net they have been expanding or espousing into. When I say we did stratified sampling, I mean that we kind of covered a very broad spectrum of waste pickers. When we call waste pickers, those who are not aware, they might assume that it's a very generalized group and that it just has a one niche. But once we delve into, we understand, okay, waste pickers have various subgroups and various sub niches and individual identities within. In this is the scope of this studies, we kind of categorize into 4 broader themes or 4 broader groups, if you may call it. One is segregated waste stream waste pickers, which would include entrant buyers, sorters, partners, those who exchange waste components for good or in exchange of, let's say, material or money. And then we have mixed stream waste pickers, who are commonly referred as street waste pickers, transfer station waste pickers, dump sites waste pickers, or in Pakistani context, it would be as kachra kundi waste pickers. Then we have employed waste pickers. In this kind of group, we compounded sweepers, sanitary workers, waste collectors, municipal workers, self-employed, who could be small-scale service providers in different contexts, and then contracted sweepers as third-party employed or wagers. Self-organized waste pickers, it's mostly doorstep waste pickers, often seen as a small-scale service provider or micro-entrepreneurs who are in informal setting are providing waste collection services, and then daily wagers who are not necessarily affiliated with an external party or third party to kind of have a mutual say in or buy-in as a middleman. So who are the waste pickers in Pakistan? This context might vary in different neighborhoods or communities or even in the regions that they are in. But once we deep dive into the value chain of the waste, we see that at the point of at the very near the source or where the waste is being produced, we see 3 major groups of waste pickers. One is itinerant buyers who would come as maybe get your waste in exchange of money. We also see employed waste pickers who could be seen as, again, as informal service providers. And then we have self-organized waste pickers who could be as a micro entrepreneurs in themselves. Then we have communal bins and marketplaces, or let's say parks in our neighborhoods that are somewhat in adjacent to the source of generation, but then again could be bifurcated a bit further. Here we see sanitary workers at their employment, but also as in street waste pickers as more exposed or more adjacent or near to the source. At the third point, we have collection systems. For instance, we have transfer station in some localities. In case of Karachi and Lahore in particular. In case of Morike, we did not have a transfer station, but landfill side directly. So one could understand in terms of the context, one of these instances could be skipped, but where the context allows, one additional group could be added. So in case of Lahore and Karachi, we also have GTS or Kachra Kundi waste pickers. And then we have the landfill or dump site or disposal site waste pickers, commonly referred as landfill waste pickers. In case of Pakistan, what we noticed that it is a male-dominated area. Mainly Pashto-speaking or Muslim community was dominated across all three countries, but that could be generalized in case of Pakistan as well. We also have some of the non-Muslim community representative as well, but that was more seen in the Sindh state province, that is in Karachi state, but that's also due to the how social setting has been in Pakistan. In terms of gender bifurcation, we saw that women have been involved, but in certain instances, in certain groups, they are more dominant, and in certain groups, they have very few presence. We will be speaking more about the gender dimension in my later presentation, but nonetheless, we do see that women as a permanent contractor or as a sanitary worker has been more dominant within the value chain or the streamline of waste picking in Pakistan. While we were conducting or grouping this waste pickers, we had an extensive debate about how we want to define waste pickers. So that has been an interesting debate, but I think that is still remained an unfinished discussion and would like to hear more comments during our QA session. So the debate revolved around whether we want to assume that those who associate their livelihood primarily and solely with waste material recovery, should we call them as waste pickers, or those who have also secondary means, primary or secondary, and then also do waste picking as a means to their additional livelihood, should they also be conceived as waste pickers? For the sake of this project, we assume either they are primary or secondary resource of income, whether if they are involved in waste picking, they will be listed as waste pickers. For instance, in case of informal sector, they are the one who are, let's say, more lenient or more prominent waste picker in terms of finances, more stable ones. Nonetheless, much of their reliance was on waste picking, that they would collect, sort, and then recycle. They do not necessarily provide waste collection services in slum areas or low middle income areas, primarily because the waste value have there been such that the waste collection door-to-door services or fee from household is not enough for them to have this business sense or business visibility for them to allow waste picking or allow them the services in their respective area. So with this understanding, we assumed and then we concluded for this particular project, and in our future references, perhaps we tend to include waste pickers, those who have any regard for their livelihood with waste picking associated, whether primary or secondary. One thing that interestingly came out during our study was interaction among waste picking groups. Initially, we assumed, or the hypothesis was developed, that there would be peer-to-peer learning. For instance, street waste pickers would be leveraging on transfer station waste pickers, or maybe informal service providers, or let's say landfill transfer stations or landfill waste pickers. But to our surprise, we saw that the waste picking is a very territorial exercise and also in business to them. With street waste pickers, they face access restrictions due to the other waste service provider, particularly those who are informal small-scale service providers. So they wouldn't necessarily allow them to even pick their waste from the streets in their neighborhood, although informal small-scale service provider, most of them do not tend to get involved into the sanitary services, for instance, cleaning the streets and others. But nonetheless, these restrictions remains in the neighborhood where they provide those services. In terms of waste management companies, a lot of time they criticize waste pickers for reducing collected waste and causing scattered waste around the bins. This is also to do with the KPIs and how the contractual setting has been developed, or the TORs are being developed for the waste management service provider on which they are being paid. Then at the point of transfer stations, we observe that waste picker closely work with a few peers or interact with kabariwalas, but again within their own specific point or within the same group of the transfer station waste pickers. Offer learning, shared experiences through conflicts and fights among common collectors are common. So we did see some peer-to-peer learning, but that was specific to within the group, but not across the groups. Waste pickers with designated collection houses, or if we may call them as service provider, may have been facing conflicts or altercation if there have been other individual or with similar appetite for waste collection service provision in their locality. So they wouldn't necessarily allow another entrepreneur or another informal service provider within their neighborhood, primarily because of this business or economic sense of theirs. Salaried waste pickers, whether they are sanitary workers or employed as third-party wagers, mostly work in team, build strong relationship, and share information and assist each other when necessary. In terms of social background, which has been very interesting because this is how they have been relying on this social assets that they have developed for so forth over the time. What we observed that the waste picking industry in Pakistan mostly relies or expands upon as a micro enterprises or as a family business, primarily or mostly in informal service provider cases, or in case of transfer station waste pickers. When it comes to waste pickers at the street level, there we saw more individual or unassociated individual coming into the waste picking activity. Waste picking in Pakistan primarily is preferred by marginalized groups, individual with limited education or livelihood expenses and accounts, and the minorities. The waste pickers as service provider in Pakistan are primarily Pashtun-speaking community who have been serving as self-employed service provider primarily among all the groups. Additionally, we saw in the year of 2022 to 2023, due to economic downturn and some financial constraint, we saw many other individuals who were not necessarily associated with waste picking priorly came into waste picking, and their primary entry point was to enter as street waste pickers rather than any other group. So the transfer station waste picking did not welcome them, the landfill waste picker did not welcome them, and the entry point for such individual who did not have any prior experience or any prior network or their family wasn't involved was primarily waste and get into waste picking through street waste pickers. Individuals who become waste pickers are often street waste pickers again because there are less sense of territorial or seniority system in place for them. This transfer station waste pickers, we observe that they are mostly associated as a business within families. So they are working in those territories from generations to generations, or their cousin would be coming in and they have strong family and kinship assessments. Self-employed waste pickers, they see them more as a business people and more as an entrepreneurs and have a sense of this micro entrepreneur in them. So once we talk to them, they would more talk about money, more talk about revenues, more talk about the business case. So they have like strong sense of accounting, a so strong sense of business case, but also have good sense of family business, how to expand and outsource if they need me. We saw conflicting and concerning working conditions for waste pickers. Given the scenario and the climatic condition of Pakistan, the high temperature was one that was kind of like mentioned or pronounced as a critical condition or concern for all groups of waste pickers, especially during summers, where they see because of the high temperature, they have to tend to work on a reduced hours. Hence, they are more vulnerable in those points because then they are tend to get less value or less income in those particular times. Lack of access to shelter and drinking water was another point that was mentioned. Again, more pungent in high temperature or the summer restrictions areas. I have also listed some quotes from them. Feel free to get to know them. We also saw in terms of self-employed waste pickers, the collection services they provide face challenges primarily among the flooding season because then they have limited access to household, limited access to streets, limited access to certain neighborhoods who might be flooded or might be drained, and hence they have substantial reduction in their income and more vulnerable to the poverty shocks. Waste pickers who are contracted or daily wagers in private or public companies were seen to have more high working loads. So their KPIs were set way beyond what additional or what standard human right associations would recommend. A lot of time without any break, straight for working from 7 to 8 hours, and insufficient staff with no paid time off during vacations and other necessary events. Additionally, they also had several issues with equipment. Their wheels were, let's say, from the bins were broken, or they were not significant additional resources to manage the waste within their capacities. On the right side, you would see a graph that would kind of explain how the waste is being handled, and on average, on a daily basis, how many or what groups would they can kind of expose to hazardous elements or even medical not necessarily. In case of mixed stream waste pickers, and they have the more exposure to most hazardous, and they're more exposed to these extreme conditions, let's say whether they be blood, sharp metals, broken glasses, feces, or needles. Segregated stream, they were more protected from them because they are getting more cleaner, let's say, relatively sorted waste in per se, and then contracted did not necessarily have this exposure again per se. To continue with the working condition challenges, they face chronic challenges of harassment and security issues that was prevalent among all groups of waste pickers and across the 3 regions that we covered, both mega cities and secondary cities. Most of them mentioned that waste pickers from Pashto-speaking community in particularly seem to have a better relationship with police in particular and have faced several harassment and security issues. Often face social stigmatization and negative stereotypes. They have been perceived as drug addicts, as thieves, as individuals involved in illegal activities. So there are certain biases that has been associated with waste pickers in Pakistani community. This result in further marginalization, discrimination, and limited livelihood opportunities. Again, to the group that is already in minority is already marginalized. Waste pickers, especially those are contracted and daily wages, again face heavy workloads, staff shortages, and lack of paid leave. Interestingly, when we see that we have across whole value chain and the movement of waste is from one point to the other, but also among various stakeholders and various stages, we also then have an understanding how do waste pickers operate among those waste stages. So street waste pickers choose areas based on their familiarity, about their connection or just knowing the neighborhood and the local connection. In these areas, lacking waste collection, they expand their services as entrepreneurs. As we saw, a certain informal service provider, they were initially as street waste pickers, but once they had this understanding of their neighborhood and the economics of the business, they then get into the service provision activity through the support of certain capital and certain social assets. Transfer station waste pickers sell waste daily due to the space constraint, and that's allowed them to more vulnerable to the poverty because they have lack of negotiation power because of lack of space constraints. They are also more involved in family and business selling options. Landfill waste pickers are more familiar with the area. Most of them have been living there for generations from maybe 20 to 30 years, and mostly sell the waste collected within those neighborhood, and mostly kabariwala or the junk dealer would come to them rather they would go to the city or the urban centers because of the convenience and also the rates they would prefer or the economics of it, let's say. Waste pickers, those who operate within this dynamics are very competitive, providing collection services to private housing and other residences, and they would normally charge certain payment to that. We also observed that they have also been onboarded by some unions, but through informal contracts and informal governments or invisible governance mechanisms. And those recruitments are never formally acknowledged or recognized, but they are working behind the scenes or without any provisions. Segregated waste pickers negotiate prices usually provided by the list accommodated by the junk dealer to them. So they have this kind of negotiation power, but sort of facilitated by the middleman. Salaried waste pickers sell recyclable waste as mixed waste, earning through fixed prices. So we also see there is a notion of fixed prices versus variable prices and how that leads to different protection in terms of their livelihood and means. Housing was also one of the key area that was brought up, and they was very concerning about it, primarily during the climatic condition when there is flood, when there is drought, but more so, let's say about the flood areas, because then they would have to migrate from one place to the other, although they are living in substantial or slum areas to begin with. So they often resort to setting up informal settlements around, let's say, a landfill dumping site or transfer stations. So they have to commute less, and they are readily accessible to the waste they are provided. They are often at risk of eviction by the authorities. We see that more so in the case of Karachi as compared to Lahore, which can lead to the displacement and loss of livelihood for the waste pickers. We saw that lack of business basic infrastructure such as gas and electricity have been there even among the waste pickers who have been living in more relatively safer communities, let's say low-income areas compared to the slum areas. Lack of access and to basic amenities such as clean water, proper sanitation was pronounced. One interesting fact I think that our report or a study has brought in is the involvement of kabadiwalas. We see that a lot of empirical studies show kind of restraints or some caution about the role of kabadiwalas. But in case of Pakistan, we interestingly saw a positive side of that as well, that a lot of the waste pickers were more or so organized around the kabadiwalas. The max distance we catered was 11 to 15 kilometer. Most of the waste picking groups, they would prefer to settle within the neighborhood or the vicinity of 2 to 5 kilometers of distance. They organize around kabadiwalas for various reasons, for social protection net, for providing them with loans, for assistance, for facilitation, and then negotiation at different interests. With kabadiwala, the assessments that had been listed in the literature and by various peers were also seen, but that is still to debate whether they're seen as a positive remark or a negative remark, that the self-organization and non-written agreement has been there. And there is a grouping and access and ethnicity-based territorial associations. Waste pickers have developed their own system of negotiation and operating within the communities without the need for formal contracts or written agreements. That's also to expedite the process, but at the same time, it makes them more vulnerable to certain challenges that otherwise be protected through legal means. Waste pickers designate their own areas or territories for waste collection based on first come and first serve, and that has been across the groups, whether they are street waste pickers, transfer station waste pickers, or others. Clean waste pickers are observed to have some bargaining and negotiation power, but that's also because they sometimes have other experiences of livelihood. They might be selling fruits or other means. So they have more exposure to dealing with different sort of materials, but also different sort of businesses as well. The loan agreement between junk dealer or kabadiwala, if you may call it, and waste pickers are often verbal and not documented, and sometimes even preferred. That's why they sometimes not prefer to go to banks and otherwise, but also because it's more convenient and expedited and accelerated process, leading some of the waste pickers to feel vulnerable at the same time in their relationship with kabadiwala, that they have to lack negotiation power because they are relying way too much on the middleman. Kabadiwala again play an important role for clean waste stream waste pickers by providing equipments, and also Mori, which is advance payment, so they can buy waste material in exchange of money from the residents and other clients. Social protection net was most pronounced aspect in our study. That also allowed them us to understand how they organize themselves, why the role of kabadiwala or the middleman is important, but also in the future intervention, what should be done. So we saw that there's lack of access to the formal social protection mechanism, including health insurance. Waste pickers in Pakistan depend upon kabadiwala primarily for their loans and financial aids, covering essential expenses like health, education, social events such as weddings or funerals. Waste pickers often receive undocumented loans from kabadiwalas who deduct a portion of their earnings until the repayment is done. And this also allows them to receive financial aid from friends and family in addition. Then we also observe that waste pickers generally are noticed not to be familiar with formal government schemes. Let's say that was provided during the COVID, or in locally we have healthcare or certain provisions called BNZ income support, or that many were not even aware that such mechanism or such schemes exist to begin with for them to allow to benefit from them. So there is lack of coverage or lack of access to certain information, especially in certain groups which are already low in terms of education and certain network. In some cases, they were able to get certain, let's say, loans or other financial means from company they work with, but that was restricted to certain groups only. Again, we also have certain dimension of gender display within the waste picking community. It remains a male-dominated area for all the working groups, but let's say for the Pashto community or Muslim community, women were being engaged at the sorting point, but not necessarily at the waste picking point. We saw that the Koli community, non-Muslim community, were more active with the gender, let's say, interplay, where women were actively involved in waste picking, but that was more restricted to landfill areas where they have been living for 20 to 30 years and have more understanding of each other in the neighborhood and the community, so they feel more comfortable or secure in a sense that they can go out and then pick the waste. Women participation in self-employed waste picking as collection service provider is very limited. So we did not necessarily encounter any business waste picking woman in the sphere. If a waste picker is sick, they may take young girls from their family to collect waste picking from household. So that has been quite common across all the working group, waste picking groups. In contrast, women are more likely to work as permanent contracted waste pickers that we also may known as sanitary waste pickers. In case of trade unions and officially accepted organizations, there are very few, unfortunately, and the union that have been in play in Pakistan, that their role has been diminishing over the years due to various reasons, but nonetheless, let's highlight their importance and certain support. One thing that we wanted to also mention in the pinpoint was existing laws hinder formal integration or cooperation with waste pickers. So we do not have any example or any demonstrative example where could we see there is a synergy or interaction that has been played between the formal and informal actors. Or if there is an informal service provider, the municipality build upon their existing network or their existing businesses and then leverage as an example. So we do not existingly have such formal informal interplay at all in Pakistan. And there is currently no framework guiding municipalities incorporating municipal waste management services with waste pickers, but this also corresponds to multinational companies and others who want to expand the social sustainability of their life cycle supply chains and then include waste picker or the informal actors within their supply chains. We also observe power dynamics, relationship with authorities, and contractual nature, which influence waste management contracts, requiring negotiation for waste picker service provisions, together with informal or invisible governments. Again, the role of union, trade, or labor has been very limited and in fact been sidelined for several years. On top of that, we also saw some changes in the waste system. So there have been some changes within the climate because of certain working conditions, but also how the waste management system or behavior and consumption styles or modernization of waste is happening. So that has also been influenced and affecting waste pickers in general. We saw the urbanization and population growth is affecting. It creates certain opportunities for certain groups of waste pickers who can set up to provide waste management services in undeserved areas, particularly low middle income areas, because the municipality on their radar prefer providing services to high income areas as their program priority. Urban commercialization impact on waste pickers. We saw that the inner city development and commercialization has led to more regulated waste management, limiting the opportunities for waste pickers. Security guards often seen as that in the commercial areas, they would restrict the access or would just to create the customer friendly ambience, they wouldn't allow waste pickers to have the access to waste, or even within that particular neighborhood or the vicinity. Seasonality, as mentioned, has been one that was highlighted, but on a positive side, they mentioned that during the summer, they get to have more waste to pick and sort because people consume more, let's say, in terms of PET bottles and others, so they get relatively more finances. Contractual and outsourcing, that remains a problem because of the current notion of Pakistan, changes in power and political parties directly influence, and this is a major concern that needs to be underscored. And again, changing practices within the management, privatization, a restriction to burning, another has also been seen to influence waste pickers in various capacities. With that, I'll conclude and happy to receive any question during the Q&A session.
I'm just going to maybe jump in and quickly collapse a couple of things in items. So contextually, as we just heard, the word kabadia and waste picker is a bit more complicated than what we generally know. In terms of holistically, the parallel economy is what is the waste pickers associated with. In terms of waste management, example of Lahore, you got 7,140 metric being produced. Up to 30 to 50% on top of that is recovered and collected by the parallel economy. Now, in more economic or public sector absorption, per ton, $17 to $21 is given for collection and disposal. That's the macro sort of financial contribution or efficiency and operational level of the informal sector. And in terms of categories and hierarchy, it is as complex as a multinational corporation. It's as complex as public sector service provision. So wanted to bring that to light to understand the complexities, and upon doing so, we can only really move forward towards just transition and realizing that. Without knowing the details, we can't really comment, which I believe we've been doing so for some time as a sector. So really trying to unearth that. In terms of the informal sector context, the municipal solid waste chain from the public sector, legally, we've got a SAMA agreement between city district governments within private housing societies, which legally disallows lots of collection operations to happen. However, the contribution is limited without knowing the problem or the solution that's being provided. So just in terms of the new context or new landscape and level playing field, really want to bring these aspects to light to feed into any future work that's happening across the sector. And with that, saying that, Dr. Zegum, if you can raise your hand, having trouble finding you within the participants because of some of the naming items.
Meanwhile, we sort things with Dr. Zegum. I think we can invite other speakers to maybe cover the agenda meanwhile. So I would request Dr. Safdar Ali Sohail if he can briefly share his commentary. Before Dr. Safdar, I hand over the session to you. I would like to briefly introduce you. So Dr. Safdar Ali Sohail has been a former civil servant belonging to the Commerce and Trade Services for the Central Superior Services of Pakistan, with over 39 years of experience in significant positions in diverse areas. And more recently, he is heading Social Protection Resource Center, SPRC, in Pakistan. And Dr. Safdar. Dr. Safdar, you are mute.
Okay. Shiza, thank you very much for your presentation, and thanks other colleagues also who not only for inviting me, but carrying out this extremely important study, and then sharing the highlights and the dynamics of the sector. I mean, my starting point basically is a moral one, in the sense that through your exercise, you have put value in the work of such people who normally are not seen that way. contributing to the environment is a social value which needs to be appreciated. But as you have explained, unfortunately, the stigma attached with that. This has been considered a job consigned to the marginalized communities. So there, I think we all need to respect these workers. And the way you have presented it, I think if we, instead of waste pickers, we can use the term waste workers. I mean, whatever you bring in worker, I think that should be good. For me, this is an excellent study, which is going to lead to a lot of good, positive developments. So that is why I'm very keen that we should join hands to take this work together. Now, we actually recently carried out a study for GIZ on used textile clothing, where also we had the field work and talked to a lot of people who are in the recycling and disposal of textile waste. I'll come to that towards the end. My own experience, I was with Dr. Alia, who is CEO of Social Protection Resource Center. We both were members of the core working group established by the Ministry of Poverty, Alleviation and Social Security. This is 3 years before, to extend the social protection to informal economy workers. And we proposed and contributed to the establishment of the informal economy workers unit in ministry. Unfortunately, not much work has been done. I mean, due to a variety of reasons, the usual reasons also should be on play. But the fact remains that this is an extremely difficult task. To extend social protection to informal economy workers is the Achilles heel of our own social protection system. And there, I think one of the best contribution of this study is that this has expanded the understanding of the working of the sector. We cannot have one size fitting all. We have to start with this general comment that it's very hard to extend social protection to informal economy workers. But if we start understanding the dynamics of each respective sector or subsector, it would make our task relatively easy. Now, coming to the objectives that you gave, I'll be very keen to see some more work. Maybe it's already there in the report regarding the value capture. That who produces the value? In this case, certainly this is the picker who produces the value, and you have given the whole value chain also, because eventually one way to return value to this work is to enhance the value being captured by the pickers. That's number one. Now, coming to your objectives 2 and 3, which are basically regarding the mechanisms which make it easier or smooth for the waste pickers, and the coping mechanism, you have identified that it's basically family and the networks which smoothen that, and the sector is self-organized. That is very good. But I would like to draw your attention, if you're going to add this study or undertake more work on that this whole sector, there is an aspect of community come trade traditionally. So if we could add an historical analysis to the sector. Now we take it from the waste management companies, and of course we should know the drivers of the fast growth of the sector, which now has become an important sector. But this has been a sector which had a very high presence of runaway children, of street children, of marginalized communities. afflicted with child labor. You have pointed out the aspects like relationship with the police or harassment, the relationship with the criminal gangs. So a better understanding of this aspect is also important. And if your study can tell us that whether with the rapid expansion of the sector, a kind of a formalization is taking place in which one can see it coming. So that would be a very interesting phenomenon to see that now the sector has grown big. I mean, once the sector grows big, it starts having its own problems also. But that is an aspect which would be very helpful then to prioritize the future course of action. If we are taking it as a business sector, which you have given a lot of time on that, taking waste as a subsector in the market economy, then perhaps we would go towards more of labor market interventions, which would involve training and then to an effort to quantify the unmet social protection needs. But there, I think I can see a problem with the way the questions have been framed. You start with the pickers, with the human aspect, with the labor, but you spend too much time on the working of the sector as a business, which is fine, which should also be there, but somehow we are we get busy in the dynamics of the sector. So there, I think if we bring back the focus, particularly when we are talking about the future interventions, there one of the major way forward which we can study is that how to first of all to understand whether the formalization of the sector is desirable, in the sense that if we don't privatize the waste entirely and we strengthen the municipal committees, then maybe we can end in formality, and these very people can be integrated into some kind of system where they have some rights. And this relationship, which is becoming problematic, that the private service which now is involved, which does not give due care to the community aspects, it started having issues with the waste pickers. So that issue would remain there. Then I would imagine that this study could not focus on the status of social protection status of the pickers or the households which are involved there in terms of awareness or in terms of being beneficiaries, because this is the base beneficiary status, which also can lead to the health status. In my own view, here we can try with innovative social protection systems. Right now, you have drawn our attention to the sad situation where it is the kabadia which provides the kind of social, you can't call it really social protection. This is a bonded relationship which is there in many other areas also with undocumented loan, because that eventually reduces the value capture by the kabadia. So can as an experiment, this is a small universe, we can think of some such models where we can have some CSR backed funds to take care of the community, I would say. This is a community which has families, maybe we can help them sedentarize. And I personally would have a question mark on the presence of female labor. I think the presence of female labor in this sector is much higher than the study shows. And there, I think if we can talk about female labor solidarity, that can also be helpful. So again, thank you very much for doing an excellent study, which would become a foundation for solid policy development work, as well as localized interventions and a better understanding of the whole sector and the contribution being made by these people. I think that would help in general also to improve the condition of the waste pickers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Safdar, for these very critical remarks, I would say. Just to mention that the scope of the study was as such that we wanted to understand the waste pickers through their own perspective and how they see themselves and also how they organize, because that's crucial to once we understand that kind of universe and communities, that allows us to then intervene and then interplay with certain dynamics. But for sure, I think through your comments and certain feedback, we have several interesting ideas and point of thoughts to think through and leverage on. Dr. Mansoor will, I think, further will add in his remarks to your comments. But for now, I think I'll hand over to Ali to perhaps introduce Dr. Zegam. Dr. Mansoor, we will wait for your remarks in the end, perhaps. Yeah.
So we have Dr. Zegam Abbas joining in next. He's a very senior, custodian of MOCC. He recently visited Nairobi in Kenya for the INC3 and was able to share some of these findings with the global audience, part of the dialogues. I'm going to leave the rest introductions and context and public sector, point of view, opinion, and landscape for such work to him, and all the best. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Zegam.
Dr. Zegam, you are mute. If you kindly, yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ali Sayed and CISA for organizing this session. And I also appreciate the comments by Dr. Safdar Suhail, who is seniors and work with us in Ministry of Commerce, and we also met in some meeting in Geneva. And I just want to share the prospects of Pakistan initiatives as well as the international negotiation which is going on, plastic pollution, including the marine environment. I am part of that negotiation, and I attended the first meeting that was held in Uruguay in 2022, and then I was part of in INC3. So plastic is now a global issue, and we are discussing about this plastic pollution in all sectors. I just want to brief about the INC3 proceedings, which was focused not only the plastic pollution, they are also focusing how can we control the generation of these polymers. So this is very important. When we will stop the generation and production of the polymers of different types. And the second thing, when we are going to addition of different polymers, different chemicals, and as per our UN report, 16,000 chemicals are being added in the plastic polymers. So it is a terrible situation that 3,000 chemicals which have material safety data sheets, and the remaining 13,000 chemicals which we are using in different products in our daily life, in toys, in our crockery, in other products, we have no information about that. So secondly, the waste management that was also discussed during the INC3, because in the developing country, we are only recycling about 9 to 10%. And the remaining 90% is still in the environment. And as per UN data, 9.5 billion ton waste produced since 1950, and we are only able to recycle 9 to 10%. And even we have conducted study in Pakistan, and about 3.3 million plastic is in annually, and 1.1 million ton is being recycled. So this is the main issue which we are not focusing, because the plastic is not only the waste, it is also a resource. In some categories we are focusing, and we are collecting the valuable plastic like PET bottles, that is very common, and waste pickers in Pakistan is very vital to collect these PET bottles for their daily life lifespan. And even the child labor is also involved in this collection. But I think it is mostly informal sector, and uh, they are not being helped by any uh, government system. Even the multinational companies, local companies, they are not supporting these waste pickers. So that is very alarming in Pakistan. And even if I elaborate it, uh, in the dumping site, they went with their children, with their women, and they are just getting back the plastic atoms from that side, where mostly places they were burning. And if we burn the plastic waste, that is very common, dioxins and furan generate. So that is also pops and highly carcinogenic. And these people are illiterate, and they are just picking the plastic atom just for their living, but they are not aware about the contamination which they are inhaling. So this is very serious issue, and on this forum, I will recommend and suggest that the government, along with the private sector, should come and to look about this waste pickers, and to get into the formal sector, and they at least have the proper PPEs, personal protective equipment, when they are going to pick these plastic atom. And regarding the policy levels, Pakistan has already taken some initiatives. First, in the last year, we have single-use plastic prohibition regulation in 2023. That was just on the F of World Environment Day on 5th June. We have launched this single-use plastic prohibition, as well as now government of Punjab has also launched their single-use plastic regulations. And yesterday I heard that Baluchistan government have also have plastic related regulations, and KPKL also amended their act and included the provisions of plastic pollution. And one thing I add, that if we talk about the circular economy, in this regard, Ministry of Climate Change, with the support of World Economic Forum, there is a global plastic partnership action plan that is Pakistan is also part of that initiative, and under which we are going to manage plastic in the way of circular economy. And we have different stakeholders, including the private sector, municipal corporations, and NGOs. So these are, and nowadays there is a consultative process, and different levels, and NPAP team is working with EPAs at Punjab, at Sindh, and different provincial level. And after that, then we have a national roadmap. How can we manage this plastic? And tentatively, we have a target of 2040 to meet the roadmap for the plastic pollution. So that is under discussion. And finally, we have a round of national dialogues at Islamabad after the conclusion from the provincial level, and having their inputs, then we will discuss in details. So regarding this study, which conducted by Ali Sayed, I think it is highly appreciable. But I just want to add that we have also to link development between the recyclers, because Caesar was pointing out that there is no recycling system or organization. But in ministry we have different meeting with the Plastic Waste Importer and Recycler Association. They are based in Lahore, and they have quoted that 600 facilities in Pakistan and about 600,000 people are associated with this recycling facilities. And there is a need to remove the link of Kabadia, and we have to focus that the link should be developed from waste picker to the direct recycler like industry. As I know, one industry in Lahore, they are using PET bottles and they are producing staple fiber, and that is the best quality staple fiber. Even they are using in local product as well as they are exporting. One international brand, IKEA, is using this staple fiber, and even they are mentioning in their product that this product is made from the recycled PET bottle. And even we can use different carpets and other things from this PET bottle. Similarly, PVC is recycling for making other products. So there is a need to sensitize and to create mass awareness that how can we maximize the recovery and recycling of these plastic atoms. Because as I mentioned that we are only just getting 10% for recycling and 90% still in the waste stream. And we have to focus about the recyclability, and we have to enhance, and I emphasize on the technologies, because unfortunately in Pakistan, being a developing country, we have no segregation system, and everything is being dumped in one facility, is one dumping site, and it is very difficult how can we get these plastic atom, which is resource. And as I mentioned that it is a polymers, and every plastic can be recycled. I have just experienced to visit last week ago to Lahore. There is a facility. They are making different products like benches, like planters, like dustbins from the recycled atoms. Even they are making some public parks from this recycled plastic. And now even we have also requested to make some products from the polythene bags, and they are just making products. And in this regard, another alliance, core alliance, is also working in different sectors with ministry, and they have now we are working with them, and with regarding their awareness and recycling plan. We have a good coordination with this core alliance, and they have also committed to make their targets by their companies by 2025, because they are focusing on packaging material, and for the sustainable consumption and for the recycling. So that is the group of about more than 18 companies, multinational and national. So these things. One other things which I want to share about this forum, that recently Pakistan have a part of international World Bank projects that is known as please plastic free rivers and seas. So nowadays we have just launched these projects, and its span is about 2 years. And under this project, we are going to make a national plastic waste management strategy, and as well as we are making the IT-based solution. How can we to mark the hotspot in different location of Pakistan, from where the plastic waste is being generated, and it is IT based system from which we can locate different positions of plastic waste generation and their hotspots. So at the end of 2025, we will have the IT-based solution and the national plastic waste management strategy. So till now, I think sufficient. If someone has a question, then I will be available. Thank you. Over to you, Ali Sayed.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Egum. I believe Dr. Mansoor, it's your time to shine.
Dr. Mansoor, you are mute. Just a quick comment to Dr. Zekam. Thank you for highlighting the need for safer products and using safer chemicals. This is some of our future work that we are also expanding into, but also highlighting the safer side or the health side of the products and the plastic and the waste within. I think this also point back to Dr. Sabdar's comments on value capture. When they value capture, there are significant exposures to it, which is we also try to highlight. One thing just to clarify, we meant that there are very few initiatives or people working with waste pickers. We have very active recycling sector in Pakistan, but a lot of them work with middle men or junk dealers, but not necessarily working directly with the waste pickers. And there is perhaps need for another study just to see what sort of challenges would add to recyclers if they were to work with waste pickers directly, but also what additional cost would it be them or what additional benefits would it be with them. I would leave more remarks. Perhaps Dr. Mansoor, you can also give remarks on Dr. Sattar's comment and also Dr. Zegam's comments together with your concluding remarks. Allow me to briefly introduce you. So Dr. Mansoor is a solid waste management consultant with more than 35 years of experience in planning projects, designing systems, and assessing recycling potential and creating livelihood from waste-related activities. He has very extensive experience in Asia with a focus on Bangladesh and Pakistan. And has been working as an independent consultant and advisor to various entities and academic partners and otherwise. Thank you. Dr. Mansoor, you are mute and hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shiza. Thank you, Ali, and thanks all the participants for this. I will be very brief and touch on few points because obviously in this meeting and this presentation or research, we are not going to resolve all the issues. Just before the start of this study, we also completed 2 years research with LSE Cities, which was funded by the British Academy. I'm based in the UK, which looked into the sector over last 25 years in Pakistan and Ethiopia. And one of the important findings for that study is that nothing has changed in terms of practice. So when we started this study, I was only the advisor advising and supporting Shiza and Ali. One of the key questions for us is what are the triggers and possibilities for change? Because nothing has changed in the lives of waste pickers or waste collectors or sweepers. It's very similar to what it was when we did our PhDs 25, 30 years ago. So I think that brought back to some of the comments made by Dr. Azhar and on Dr. Zegam. Pakistan is a signatory to environment. Pakistan has initiatives on social protection, but Pakistan is also signatories to number of poverty alleviation, poverty reduction, global agreements. I think the question which this study and this discussion is raising is, are we in a position to see these things more holistically or not? And this is our choice, especially stakeholders in Pakistan and stakeholders who are like me, who are interested and concerned and committed to Pakistan. Or can we continue to see things in silos, which was raised by one of the speakers. So that is one thing, and it's our choice. If we think that the technological development or a stronger policy and implementation can change the game, we must go for it. And we can learn a lot from neighboring countries, especially India and Pakistan, India and Bangladesh, where obviously EPR, social protection, number of these things have been tried. and they have lessons, both positive and negatives. So that is first point. I think in terms of research, it is, as I said on my blogs, and I'm going to say it in future blogs, this study brought a very good basis for further actions in Pakistan, whether it is about formalization, whether it's about recognition of waste pickers, whether it is protection, or whether it is improving circular economy, because this sort of data and analysis I've not seen in many years. So very good information. Data is a challenge in the sector. Data is a challenge on social protection, as said earlier, and this provides some good qualitative and quantitative data. So again, it's our choice whether we want to use this data or not, or we want to raise some more questions based on this study, because this was a specific scope on the social organization of waste pickers. So that's quite interesting. I was just as an example, the typology and discussion between we have among the teams on the waste pickers and how many sub typologies are there. It's a very rich discussion. It's very interesting, very important, and the dynamics and seasonality of that. And to me, that takes us back to a very important point, which was raised earlier about the innovation in social protection, what sort of social protection they need, because we use the term formalization, and there's a lot of intention on formalization in many countries, including Pakistan, but without acceptance and recognition, that formalization, that benefit may not happen. So we need to carefully think about what we want to achieve and how, whether formalization is the first step, or thinking whether formalization is the right word, or whether acceptance and recognition is the right word. To my students globally, which are 3,000 followers, I use the term protection, because in what I've seen in Europe and number of other countries is you need to protect certain practices because they are very important. For example, in Pakistan, 90% people source separate waste, right? And they now also separate plastic waste. Now, to us, what we found, this practice is under threat because of number of reasons, social reasons and systemic reasons. Do we need to protect it? In the same way we protect farmers in Europe, we protect small markets in the Europe, we protect small producers in the Europe. So I use the term protection rather than anything else. And formalization, I hope we will achieve that point soon with our positive intention. I mean, there are lots of other points which are there, but I just want to say one more thing, and that is, to me, this is not this work is not a start and end. And to me, I strongly recommend that we should not see it as a project which is a starting point and an end point. This is very much an ongoing thing. To me, this research adds a lot of value to this, including some other recently completed research, and how we use this value, especially the knowledge value, the data and information, in the decisions we want to take, in the practices we want to take, in the direction we want to take, whether it's policy direction or practice direction, whether it's control of something or whether it's enhancement of something. So that is where I think it's important that we see all this as a continuous work. And yes, projects are important, but these processes and these learning is something which is always close to my heart. So I stop here, Shiza. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have 10 minutes for question answers. So happy to take some question among the team. And I would invite and everybody to perhaps they can unmute themselves, perhaps raise their hand, and we can take some questions. And perhaps meanwhile, we can also take some questions from the chat. Yeah. If you have any question, please raise your hand. So that would allow us. If not, then I see some
there
questions.
are a couple of questions we can pick up if you want.
Yeah, I don't see any questions, so perhaps Dr. Mansoor, if you can assist.
There are questions on the data separation rates. There are questions on the protection, and there are questions on the role of kabaris. So, shall
There's questions in the chat. If maybe individually, those that are still with us can raise their hand and re-ask that question, maybe that'd be a bit effective.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, so we have a question from Francis asking about, could you please elaborate on the age profile of the different waste collection workers? So I think Dr. Mansoor, you can also add to it, but during our study, we have seen a range of age groups working within this sphere. And I think I saw a comment that if this true that the average age is 30, would say could be, but this wasn't necessarily the point or focus of our study. But the 40 interviews and then 40 surveys from each, we had very diverse age profile ranging from 20s, but also some attendants or some participant ranging in their 60s as well. So again, diverse range. So it's hard to pinpoint what the in between is. And Dr. Mansoor, if you would like to add.
Yeah, no, this is a good point, and I think we need to be careful about the visible and invisible part of the group. What we talked and what we presented, a lot of it is visible part, but there's also a very big invisible part, which, to be honest with you, we have not accessed properly. So, for example, on age, I feel there's an invisible part which is working in their godowns, in their storage yards, and they are earning their livelihoods, and they may be older people, senior people, but also on gender, very similar thing. I feel we could not access a number of areas because of cultural reasons and other, and within those boundaries, behind those walls, we feel there are lots of women workers also working. So again, there are lots of unexplored questions there, and what we presented is visible. So visible part is, yes, strong male adult around between 20 and 30. Thanks.
We have a question from Shaista. Can you also reflect a bit on the collection and the recycling side? Just to explain about this study, the scope was more on the collection and the sorting side, because this is where the waste pickers are more pronounced. They not only sort, but also at various points provide waste collection services. We call them as a small scale or informal service providers. And once they sort segregate, they tend to sell it to the junk dealers, or if they have the access, they sell it directly to the recycler, informal or formal otherwise. Since we do not have any formal material recovery facilities therein, hence the role of the kabadiwalas therein. And once the material is flowed to the kabadiwala or the junk dealers, it is then flowed into the recycling segment. Nonetheless, the waste pickers remain the pinpoint or the base for the recycling community to retrieve the material from the waste and the material otherwise, whether there's a mixed stream or clean stream. Ali, if you also want to comment further. Then we have a few questions from Imran on the data points. Just to mention, this was not the focus of the study, but these data points are available, which we would be happy to share perhaps via email once we confirm. So on top of my head, I do not remember the percentages, so would like to maybe keen back. How would the Afghani waste pickers that have left Pakistan can influence the sorting and collection of waste? I think that is one key questions that we also wanted to, in some capacity, want to touch upon. It has positive aspects and it has negative aspects. For instance, a lot of Pashtun or Afghani that we saw in certain communities were providing services, waste collection services to slum areas in certain capacities in low middle income areas, in the absence of KMCs, in the absence of municipalities. So if those are to intervened or restricted, of course, we would see some certain health implication in those communities that they would not have access to this basic entity. On the other hand, the recycling community, they might struggle with certain supply chains challenges. On a positive side, perhaps there is a more opportunity for Pakistani-based entrepreneurs or otherwise to step into this waste cycling sphere or waste management sphere. and then expand upon the opportunities that has been left or build upon the experiences of Afghani waste pickers. Dr. Mansoor, if you also can add this too, I think that's a good question. And
Nothing to probably add on this one. I think you have more updated knowledge on this. Thanks.
As for the question on the conflicts among formal and informal, we have captured that extensively in our report, which we will share perhaps in a day or two. So we have your emails. It will be published on our website as well, but also with colleagues from WIEGO and Alliance for Waste Pickers. So it will be published on various platforms. So yeah, I think I would rather suggest that you read the full report just to understand what sort of conflicts we have come across during our study. Mhm. Okay.
Shiza, I just read one of the last messages. I think I'll jump in. So Hina mentioned, that we've mentioned that waste pickers work at transfer stations, and where we've also said there's no formal material recovery facilities. So in terms of just that on the public infrastructure system side, so transfer stations still in Pakistan, in the major cities, technically they're transfer stations, but they're more so defined actually as temporary transitionary points in a way. You can't really also call them transfer stations. So they're open plots with some buildings that are controlled, but that's where the public system collects their waste as transitionary point for secondary collection and disposal. So that's where you see lots of waste picking activities, but that's where the terminology has to be just very finely managed. So does that mean transfer stations are part of the informal recycling sector? So technically they're temporary transfer points. They're not really transfer stations. Secondly, they seem to be an interim sort of point or node for informal sector recycling activities to go through or start, but they can't be considered in either or spectrum appropriately right now. We're still in our growing phases as a sector.
I think there is a further debate that perhaps need a separate discussion whether the role of kabadiwala, or what should be the role of the kabadiwala, and if it should be there in Pakistan, how would the way forward should be. And we see some among the authors, I think Ali has a recycling business on the end, so he has a very direct connection with middle men or the junk dealers, so he has different, let's say, recognition for them. I and Dr. Mansoor from practitioner point of view have different understanding, and colleagues from WIEGO, perhaps we among our discussion had a different understanding and concerns. So I think this is something that we would like to take back and reflect more, and perhaps release a white paper or something before commenting here, because there is a rich discussion that needs to be unfolded before we can jump into, oh, is this a debt trap, or this is something bonded labor or bonded wage or bonded relationship. I think it's much more than that. And the waste sphere is quite unique if we compare to agriculture, fishers, and other retailers because of various nuances that we see in it. Yeah.
I'll hold myself back here because I know my team knows what I'm about to say, but I'm not going to answer the question directly. I'm just going to pose another question on those that have more of a Pakistani context to understand what the role of an RT is in the agricultural chain, right? And they've been with us for 100 or so years or more, and they control the demand and supply of our food supply chain. So just maybe put the word RT next to a kabadia and just explore what that means, what they entail. Are they good, bad is not for me to answer. I obviously do have biases. I think kabadias are great, but just from that point of view, just a probing question, understand what an RT does for the agri side, and then also understand what a kabadia does potentially for the waste chain or inorganic recovery chain.
So we have a question: are there any formal social protection program running or are any placed locally in Pakistan in waste picker community? I think there is a further need for mapping the best practices. But in terms of social protection, I think one shouldn't necessarily confine them to waste picking sphere. That's my personal take. Because we have good example from various other aspects, as Dr. Safdar also briefly mentioned. of various actors, and also certain trial and experimentation could be done through CSR, through certain funds, or through EPR in certain capacities, just to see what works for the waste sector, because it's a different community with different nuances. But of course, core cross-sectoral learnings would be taken over. I see Angel has raised her hand. Angel, you can unmute yourself and then ask a question, or perhaps leave a comment if you like.
Hello, Shiza, everyone. So it was a great study, and being from the sector of waste collection and segregation side. So during this study, I just wanted to ask something that because we have observed this when the waste pickers are involved into waste picking, so they prefer to be engaged in picking up the higher value substance and materials. So what was the experience during this study with that? Because usually the MLPs and styrofoams, they are not picked by the waste pickers because it doesn't have that much of value. And that are the actual materials which are polluting, filling up the landfill sites and being burned by the roadsides. So, and the second thing is this, that I have observed this during my experience, that the females involved in this sector, they are preferred. Why? Because they are given lesser salary than the male people being in this sector. So during this study, did you guys came across this issue, or were they being treated equally?
Yeah, so first, our study briefly touched upon the gender aspects of it, because that was not necessarily the scope of the study. So that is something I think for us for future work. But through our experiences otherwise in our some of incident that we came across during the study, so there is yes and no. We saw lack of, let's say, the women's side associated. So in the 40 or 120 surveys and 120 interviews we conducted across three cities, we had less than 10, I think, each city, a woman side or woman perspective participant pushing in. So from the waste perspective, it's fair in itself. As you are associated with this industry, you know that we have other actors and stakeholders within entrepreneurs, and then we have municipal service providers, then we have recyclers. What we see that we have women in this sector as we convene in the hierarchy. On the safer side, we, for instance, in the waste picking groups, they were more associated with the sanitary workers, or once they are associated with some formal organization rather than working on their own. If they are in a waste picking community, they were more at the landfill side, where they were working in a more secure manner. Perhaps they had their families or were settled there for maybe decades. Otherwise, because of the cultural or social understanding, we see that their interaction with the waste was very different. A lot of them were not involved in the waste collection at all, but at the sorting phase, once their male counterparts or other waste pickers would collect the waste as a mixed waste and then get it back to perhaps a sorting facility or at their homes, and then they would sort, segregate, and add value to it. So we didn't necessarily get into the discrimination aspects, but from a lot of understanding and the experiences we have seen, so yes, there are, and there is a need to provide better access to certain facilities and certain secure environments to them. Ali, I see you have raised your hands. Perhaps you can also add.
Just wanted to sort of answer the first half of the question regarding the low value waste collection and recovery by the informal sector and waste pickers. I just wanted to put in perspective holistically. So them picking up high value plastic or more processing potential is because it's a commercial business problem for them as well. The low value plastic productions more on the upstream side, which is not discussed. The reason why we even have high value recycling or recycling occurring in the country is because they're doing the collection that allows for circularity today. In terms of low value plastic, because they're sitting outside the formal market, they don't have access to subsidies. We've just mentioned social protection, community support, integration, formalization, etc. So we can't expect them to also do the cash burn, negative profit generating work for us. In terms of, if you look at the processing of low value plastics, even if you collect it, you're burning 60 rupees, 100 rupees per kg of OPEX to process low value plastic. So the question here is, why why, why is there an expectation that the informal sector would collect that? In terms of municipal solid waste, it only started getting collected in the country when the government had formal waste collection companies that were getting paid $17, $21 per ton to collect. That's why collection went up on the municipal solid waste side. However, the informal sector doesn't even get that. So the low value plastic is a business problem, a commercial problem, and also more of an upstream problem. It cannot be a downstream problem, that the waste pickers should solve for us.
Yeah, I think this is also why we mentioned that how waste pickers see themselves as an entrepreneur or business people, because they have also very keen sense of business and economics, and they would not necessarily get into materials or other activities which is not economically feasible or justified for them, and that needs certain market signals, certain incentives for them to, if you want them to capture, let's say, low material or low recovery or low pricing plastics, if that's the case. We have a question from Rohini. She asked that the table shows that there's a waste pickers were mentioned as salaried. And just to clarify, waste pickers as salaried, they could be as sanitary workers, for instance, truck drivers, or could be waste collectors, door-to-door service provider, or in some cases, we have also sanitary workers. In those aspects, we have seen that we associated the term waste pickers because they are also sometimes into recovering the waste material on there as a secondary resource. So anybody, again, reflecting back to our definition, anybody who is involved in waste picking, whether that's their primary income resource or secondary income resource, so we define them as waste pickers. This does not necessarily mean that the municipality or the government has taken initiatives to integrate or formalize waste pickers. That remains a very different debate and a very different concept altogether. We are already 37 minutes ahead and we have various interesting questions. But I think sadly we have to end this session. I would collect these questions and I'll get back to via email or otherwise as soon as possible. Meanwhile, wait for this recording. We will share the recording and also the publication on our website, but also via email because we have the emails through registration. So we would be happy to share. It would take us a week, if not more, since our publication is about to be on the design phase and getting ready. So thank you everyone for staying with us and for all the wonderful questions in this discussion. And yeah, if any further requests, any further ideas, any further point of thoughts that we'd like to see after reading our reports, of course, we would really urge that you read our full report and then provide us with feedback so that we can initiate. And then, as Dr. Mansoor also mentioned, this is not just a one-sided project or one project that ends a discussion. We want to take on this role and the responsibility to have more inclusive circular economy and just transition in Pakistan. So would happily receive any request and feedback from you all. Thank you, everyone, and thank you very much for all our session inviters, especially Dr. Zegam and Dr. Safdar, for your time and also staying with us for this long, for more than an hour and a half. Thank you very much, and we look forward to working you with in future on various points. And I think we would be happy that some of the points that you have mentioned we're already working on. So we would love to perhaps update you at some other event or once we meet in person at some point. Thank you very much. And with this, I'll close the session. Yeah, it was wonderful meeting you all and having a discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Thank you
So much.
Bye bye. See you.
Yeah.